Welcome to the Psychology World podcast. I'm Connor Whiteley, bringing you psychology news, articles, and other interesting psychology-related articles. Where I can find the podcast notes and more interesting psychology-related things, and you can get your free 8 psychology book box set at connorwhiteley.net. Now let's get on to the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 75 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley. And today's episode is on what to do if you're feeling overwhelmed. So this is a great episode. I definitely feel overwhelmed sometimes, especially during the pandemic. So hopefully today's episode will be really helpful for you, your family, your clients, if you're a clinical psychologist, about helping you to feel better, increase your mental health, especially when you feel overwhelmed, especially during this difficult time. So before I actually go into the psychology news section, I just want to say, wow, 75 episodes this podcast has been going for now, and I think, wow, in 25 episodes time we'll be episode 100, so I'm definitely starting to think about that, because I really want it to be quite special. So sort of just thank you all of you for listening, and let's go for at least another 25 episodes, hopefully a lot longer. Okay, so moving on to the psychology news section. So we're reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest. So the learning style myth is still prevalent amongst educators, and it shows no sign of going away. This is quite interesting, straight from the start. The idea that people learn better when taught in a way that matches their specific learning style, auditory, kinetic, visual, or some combination of the three, is widely considered a myth. Research has variously suggested that learners don't actually benefit from their preferred style, that teachers and pupils have different ideas about what learning styles actually work for them, and that we have very little insight into how much they're actually learning from various methods. Despite this evidence, a large portion of people, including the general public, educators, and those with a background in neuroscience, still believe in the myth, and a new review finds no sign of that changing. So that I think is actually quite interesting, considering I'm not sure, to be honest, if I believed in the whole learning style myth, but I definitely know that it's thrown around a lot. So it's actually quite interesting that it is a myth and that people don't really question it. But I guess that this just goes to show that when it comes to something that people just keep saying, it becomes ingrained in our culture so that we don't actually question it. So I think it's actually quite interesting, and it just shows that we all still believe it's a myth. Okay, so another one is, grateful people are more likely to obey commands to commit ethically dubious acts. Okay, so but gratitude is widely regarded as a positive emotion. When we feel grateful, we are more helpful, generous, and fair to others. Findings that were supported by a 2017 meta-analysis, which concluded that gratitude is important for building relationships, but now a new study suggests that gratitude has a dark side. Specifically, people who felt more grateful were more willing to accede to an instruction to prepare as many worms as possible for grinding to their death, as the author writes. Open quote, the findings suggest that gratitude can help a person more vulnerable to social influence, including obeying commands to perform a questionable act, close quote. And this actually makes sense, because in my personality psychology seminar like this a week, like we actually looked at a dark personality trait, and this is sort of like the same thing. So I just think that this is quite shocking, to be honest, that that this positive emotion could be so damaging. But then you've also got to think of, come on, they are just worms. So you've also got to question, how generalizable is this research to everyday life? Because worms are worms. People are different. Another one is, despite anxiety about COVID-19, climate change remains a key concern in the UK. And good, it should be. So climate change is a cause of major concern for many, but that doesn't mean anxiety about the planet is always the top of people's agenda. As we reported last year, the effectiveness of climate change appeals can vary considerably, and other research suggests that worries about the climate can be displaced by a few other issues. Brackets is all I'm going to say. Fewer Americans reported concern about climate change after the 2008 financial crash, for example. This latter phenomenon is known as the affinity pool of worry hypothesis, that as some concerns creep up on our radar, others become neglected. So with COVID-19 taking up space both in the media and in our minds, are people thinking about less? Sorry, I've just got that completely confused. Are people thinking less about climate change? Not according to a new study, which finds that climate change is now a major concern, even though serious threats of other natures don't dismiss fears at all. So this, I think, is really important, to be honest, because I remember this a great interview from a guy at the beginning of the pandemic, was sort of like midway through. Because COVID-19 is a very serious thing. People will die from it. But if we really think about it, because at the time, the people who died in the UK was 16,000. Yes, people in the UK, I think we can laugh at that number now, considering we're basically 100,000 above that now, which is quite horrific. But he said that yes, COVID is serious. It's not as serious as climate change, which I can agree with, simply because if COVID-19 killed 1% of the population, climate change kills 100% of the population. So yes, that we need to deal with COVID, but we've got to deal with climate change as well. Okay, so we will do one more. So in times of anxiety and lower mood, focusing on past successes could improve decision making. When you're going through a period of anxiety or depression, it can be difficult to make decisions, whether those are significant life changes or more mundane everyday choices about prioritising tasks or time management, and those with generalised anxiety disorder or mood disorders often report feeling uncomfortable with or distressed by feelings of uncertainty, which doesn't help when you need to make a decision, big or small. Now, a new study finds that people with higher levels of anxiety and depression are less able to adapt to fast-changing situations. But the author suggests that, with the right intervention, there may be ways to not only mitigate this distress, but to help those with anxiety or depression make better decisions in the moment. And this actually links back to one of my favourite topics about formulation, because it could potentially feed into it. And this bit of news really stresses the importance of personalising the therapy and the intervention to the client, simply because we can match their own needs and their struggles, and this will help them make the right decisions and with the support that they need. So I really hope that you found the psychology news section useful. So let's move on to the personal update. So we're moving on to the personal update. So this week, not a lot has happened, so this will be quite a short personal update. Yeah, right. This week, still doing the coursework, still doing personality psychology coursework, really enjoying it. Me and my group partner have actually got most of it done, and I'm sure none of you actually want to hear about coursework. So besides from that, there's actually nothing else to say except from next week. It's a study week, so I'm really looking forward to that, because I get to continue to work on my fiction and also do a bit of catch up, because some other bits of group coursework haven't exactly gone to plan. Sadly, but hopefully I'll still get a nice relaxing week. I doubt I will. I really doubt I will. Okay. So, as always, I always love to know your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment on the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast. And you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi-whiteley. And today's episode has been sponsored. Developmental Psychology, a guide to developmental and child psychology, is now available on all major ebook retailers, and you can also pre-order the paperback, large print and hardback copy from your local bookstore and Amazon. So I'm really, really pleased that it's done. It's available on a pre-order. So I'm really pleased that I've got this book out now. I loved it, and when I was going back through it after I wrote it, I was thinking I'm really pleased with this. And also, it's actually quite good to actually recap on it, and also that little personal section that I mentioned towards the end. I think it's really good because it really shows the developmental psychology, and it really puts all the theoretical into real life so that we can all understand it and appreciate it. So I really enjoyed this book, so I cannot recommend it enough. So that's Developmental Psychology, a guide to developmental and child psychology, 3rd edition. So we're moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about what to do when you're overwhelmed. And as I've already said, this is a great episode that I really enjoyed. And also I think this is really, really useful. Whether this is for yourself, your family, your friends, or if you're a clinical psychologist, then hopefully your clients will also find this quite useful. And the main reason why I want to talk about this today is because over the past year, through the lockdown, I think we've all felt a bit overwhelmed at various points. So yes, I really hope this is useful. But also because of the craziness of the pandemic, and also lots of other things that are going on in our own lives, your personal life, maybe your family life, it's very easy to feel stressed out and overwhelmed. And this leads to a decrease in mental health and possibly an increase in depression and other mental health conditions. So hopefully this episode will help you stop your decrease in mental health before anything happens to you like that. And as always, nothing on this podcast is ever official nor professional mental health advice. So we're moving on to these 3 tips for you or your clients or whoever when you're feeling overwhelmed. So the first one is recognise your feelings. Yes, this is not what you want to hear, probably. You probably want to hear some magical cure, but I promise you this is really, really helpful, because you need to recognise your feelings, and you also need to think about how to deal with them. So what I tend to do, and again, this might work for you, this might not, but just try it. Have fun with it. So sometimes I just sit in my room and then I make myself think about my thoughts and feelings, and this actually tells me if something's wrong. And then what I do is that if there is something wrong, I think about recent events and I think critically about them. It's like if someone moans at me, then this of course harms your mental health, because no one likes getting moaned at when you don't think you've done anything wrong. And then of course you recognise that you're feeling sad, and then you consider why they mentioned it, and it's usually out of love, and this makes you feel better, at least in my own experience. Also, at first I know that denial and pretending that you don't have these feelings is usually, or at least seems like, a good idea, but this is rarely the case, because it leads to a build-up of negative emotions and thoughts, leading to, well, a further decrease in mental health and possibly physical difficulties like tension, aggression and stress, which no one wants. And of course the whole point of this is the opposite of getting stressed and becoming aggressive. So the second tip is find a source of consistency. So we know that overwhelm tends to be caused because of stress and the lack of certainty in someone's lives. So finding a consistency is a must, and this goes for all of us. So this can be in others, but it can also be in ourselves too. For example, we can find consistency in our own values, and also in the personality, and also in our personality traits. For example, even the thought of us being a good person can actually help, which I think is actually quite nice. For example, it always brings me comfort in particular, like if I'm feeling down, that I'm a good person and I want to help people. It's like, for example, if I feel down, of course it depends on how down I feel, but I try and create a blog post, or I chip away at it, of course, depending on how bad I feel. Simply because I know that by doing that or chipping away at it, I know that I'm going to help someone, and yeah, I'm going to help someone by chipping away at it. And the same goes like for my fiction, because I know that will still provide someone with a bit of escape. Okay, so the last tip is find someone you can rely on. Yes, this is difficult sometimes. Oh, isn't it just? Yeah, sometimes I think like having reliable people is quite difficult, especially if you're away from your family, but we all fight through it. Okay, so moving on to the actual points. So this point is actually split into two different ones, because this can talk about you finding a person who can support you and everything, but it can also be a time or a memory as well. So finding a person is actually quite important, because not only can it provide us with support and also like emotional support and someone to talk to and turn to, but it can also add certainty to our lives. And over the past year, I think we all want a bit more certainty, which is why whenever the government, at least in the UK, makes a U-turn, we go, thank God for that, you should have done it earlier. I think, however, this can be a memory or a job as well, because the entire point of this idea is to find out what gives you a sense of calm and stability, and that's the whole point about how you hopefully avoid overwhelm. And this is all about hopefully helping you, because you need to relax, you need to reach a state of calmness. Like if you love looking at family pictures, then do it. Whatever activity you love, do it, because that will help you be relaxed. So that's what I can really, really recommend. For example, like to calm down, I write, I cook. Don't really do psychology when I'm not relaxed, because it takes a bit of focus. But anyway, though, hopefully you really get the idea. Okay, so I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode. As always, I always love to know your thoughts and feelings on it. And if you know anyone who would benefit from today's episode, then please tell them about the podcast. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people share about the podcast. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the show notes, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. And if you want a free 8-book psychology box set, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.